More than 12 million hectares of land have been ravaged since the outbreak of the Australian bushfires in October 2019. That's an area almost 1.5 times the size of Austria. One billion mammals, reptiles and birds have died in the flames. Many firefighting crews are working to the brink of exhaustion. Heavy rain has brought relief to some areas, but it's already causing flooding in others. Australia was not prepared for a catastrophe of this scale. How could things get so out of hand? Our journey begins in the southeast, in Broken Hill in the state of New South Wales. The Cullens live here in the outback, the country's vast and remote interior.
My name is Brendan Cullen and I live on Carrs Station, which is 60 kilometres southeast of Broken Hill. I've spent my whole life in Broken Hill.
It's spring and everything here should be blossoming. But the region is suffering from a severe drought. The last raindrops fell in October 2018. Twice a week, Brendan Cullen travels into town to buy drinking water.
Is you spend a lot of time by yourself driving around. So you see a lot and you think a lot, probably too much time. And you do sometimes, wish or pray for rain. And I think at times we've got together as a community and, had a couple of rain dances.
2019 was the hottest year in Australia since temperature recordings began in 1910.
I'll certainly not look at the 28-day forecast because, why? It just gives you anxiety levels. That goes through the roof. Why torment yourself with it?
Australia is currently experiencing the worst drought of its history. In many regions, the groundwater is running dry. That's unprecedented.
So what we'll do, we'll go out here past the wool shed, We'll go around the back.
Brendan Cullen has some 5,000 sheep. The grass is too dry to keep cattle. There's seldom more than a few sprinkles of rain. The drought is not just affecting the southeast of the country. Almost the whole of Australia has been hit. In 2019, there was 40% less precipitation than average. That too is the lowest figure in 120 years.
It's a bit of a beast, really. It attacks you from all angles. So the drought will affect your animals. It'll affect your household, your mental health, and that's for the whole family.
Brendan Cullen has been forced to drastically reduce the number of livestock on his farm. He no longer has enough water for the 10,000 sheep he used to have.
This would be probably the longest dry period without rain. Generally in a drought you might get something, but this is just becoming ridiculous.
Brendan Cullen is trying to take heart from photos he took after the last rains.
You can always look back at what it used to be like and you know that it's just around the corner. So I keep those photos there so I can look at them and just reminisce on what it can be like. Jacinta, my wife, we've known each other since we were about 14, 15. One of the best things I've been able to do, Jacinta and I have been able to do, is to be able to bring our kids up in the bush. And it's a great grounding for kids. They might see some horrible things along the way, but they become very level-headed. They're able to deal with some very ordinary situations because they see a lot.
Their children help whenever they can, but none of them want to follow in their father's footsteps.
When we come home, we often help Dad. I'm at a boarding school, so I come back to it and I notice things change, and I come back and things are changing and it's getting drier.
One factor contributing to the drought in southeastern Australia is the southward shift of winds in the cool season, which cause rain-bearing fronts to bypass the region. Climate change is making Australia's unpredictable weather even more volatile.
Last time I think I saw Dad have a proper break from any work was probably maybe 2 years ago. I think he had a pretty good break.
The Cullens have gone into debt to feed their animals. It costs them thousands of euros a week to fill the water tanks and buy straw.
I'm 45 years of age, and what I've seen in that period, I've seen change. I feel it's hotter in summer, or maybe I'm just getting weaker. I don't know. It just seems to be a lot more drier periods. I mean, if anything's going to tip you over the edge as in a business, will be a drought. And unfortunately, it's one of the main instigators of people leaving the land. So I've seen that. I've seen that before. I've experienced that.
For months, they've been strictly rationing water for showering and laundry. They use grey water for cleaning or for watering flower beds and trees. Jacinta Cullen continues to care for her garden despite the drought. The few square metres of greenery serve as a reminder of better times.
With my own husband, I see the pressures of the drought, and I see it with my friends. You know, it's really disheartening hearing them and their stories too, going through hardships, and we're just not socially, we just don't catch up as much as we normally would because people are too busy feeding, and you just can't get away.
Many farmers in southeast Australia have already thrown in the towel. The question is whether farming will be feasible in the long term. The suicide rate in rural areas is almost double what it is in urban areas.
I suffered from depression, and I didn't realise I was suffering from it. And I suppose what brought it on was just tough periods, work. So I went into the Broken Hill Base Hospital and spoke to some people, and I was diagnosed with depression. And I spent the next 6 months on tablets, and I found ways and means of being able to recognise and understand the triggering points and what was setting me off. Farmers like to stand on their own 2 feet, and they're very good at that. But unfortunately, they're in an environment where they're susceptible to the weather.
Drought brings another danger with it, the likelihood of fire. Fires have shaped this country. Aboriginal Australians have long carried out controlled burns to avoid large-scale fires. And while this practice is still commonly used in Western Australia, it's been neglected for decades in some other parts of the country. Instead of preventative fires, the focus has shifted to containing the spread of fires. A lot of combustible brush has accumulated. The consequences are catastrophic, and not just for Australia. Analysis from the US space agency NASA indicates that the bushfires have emitted more than 250 million tonnes of CO2 into the atmosphere. As fire approaches, the sky turns black and then red. Then the flames arrive. Australia's fire service depends overwhelmingly on volunteers. Cooks, students and lawyers are among those who have been trying to face down the flames. For weeks or even months at a time, they have neglected their day jobs to try to save their country. They risk their lives to try to save communities from the flames. The firefighters have lists setting out the order of priority in which things should be saved. Buildings that serve the community are top of the list, and private homes come last.
Yeah, we got a spot over here. I got urgent messages for water.
This firefighting team just managed to save themselves in time.
Jasper, put the blanket up.
Normally, it's the sparsely populated, remote areas that are hit. But this year, the fires have come very close to coastal areas where the majority of Australians live. The temperatures in the bushfire areas can reach hundreds of degrees Celsius. Almost 2/3 of Cobargo has been destroyed. The village in New South Wales is just 10 kilometres from the coast.
We're going up to see if my house is still standing and see if my horses are still alive.
At the beginning of January, Liz Lacey was forced to leave her home, her stables and her horses behind.
We're going to have to walk up. That's where the horses got out. Thank God for that.
Most of the 774 inhabitants were evacuated in time, but for one man and his son, help came too late. There's nothing left of Liz Lacey's stables, but because they were left unlocked, most of the horses were able to escape.
But anyway, it's gone now. I'm not going anywhere. Yeah, no, I'll rebuild again. Actually, we shouldn't really be here because another tree might fall on us if it's burning. Hey.
Yep.
Should go up. I mean, my heart's totally broken. But you just got to go on. Simple as that, eh? I suppose it's not that simple, but it won't be that simple. But we'll do it, and everybody else will. And we've got a great community. We'll all help each other.
The smoky air affects everyone, especially the sick, the elderly and the young. Air pollution here is now worse than in India's smog-plagued capital, Delhi. Most of the villagers live from farming. Some of their livestock and pets could be saved, some escaped, but others died a dreadful death.
Yeah, they were nice little goats. So yeah, we had two mums and their babies, and a buck. And, they were sort of family pets, I guess. But yeah, we'd start again. Hopefully the insurance is up to date. That's always the thought at the moment.
Scott Herring only bought this land for himself and his family a few months ago.
Came up pretty quick on this side. A lot of fuel in there. That's the house. It wasn't the most beautiful house in the world, but we were going to do something with it. Yeah, so this was the project. And yeah, I guess it's a bigger project now. Oh, here's the goats. Come here, goats. Come here. Come on.
Scott Herring was lucky. At least his goats have managed to survive.
yeah, it's going to be a difficult time. But I think if anywhere can do it and anywhere can pull through, then from what I've seen, Cobargo can do it.
After the fires have been put out, ash settles on the roads, the fields, the destroyed homes. For the livestock that did survive, there's a shortage of feed. Shortages caused by the drought and exacerbated by the bushfires. The situation is even more dramatic for Australia's unique wildlife. An animal sanctuary stood here in this nature reserve.
There's no sign of life, there's no sign of the dead animals. They're just burnt beyond, they've burnt to ash. If I hadn't evacuated the animals at the shelter, they could have definitely been under threat. So the toll on me is huge. Sorry, hold it a minute. Okay, hang on just 2 secs. And we can warm the milk. All right. Now we go feed. He was just skin and bone, this little fella. He was just, a little tiny little thing.
Here, they're mainly looking after young animals that have lost their mothers.
Papa, you're going to sleep.
When they've recovered, they'll be released as quickly as possible into the wild. Just a few kilometres away, volunteers are looking for feed for koalas. The creatures survive primarily on a diet of eucalyptus leaves, and only certain types of them. If one forest burns down, you can't simply move koalas to another. Tens of thousands of them are believed to have perished in the fires. It's estimated that half the koala population may have died. Over the years, wombats, another animal native only to Australia, have also lost a lot of their natural habitat. Shirley Lack looks after these herbivores.
Come on, get a bit warm outside, boy. Wombats are a lucky animal. They don't have a lot of impact as the fire's going over, but it's when they come out after the fire that the ground's all burnt and there's no food. The mother goes onto the side of the road looking for food, and they're hit, and then the babies are left in the burrow at this stage, and nobody comes back to get them. And then after a couple of days, baby goes looking for mum. It'll never recover in my lifetime. Never. Be lucky to recover in my grandkids' lifetime. Sorry.
2,100 kilometres further north is Australia's outstanding natural treasure, the Great Barrier Reef. We accompany one of the world's most renowned marine biologists out to sea.
When I first started, I'd come into a world which I had no idea existed. I thought this was creation gone mad. It was what the gods must have created to make something ultra special.
John Verren has discovered and studied more than a fifth of the world's corals. He spent more than 7,000 hours underwater. And the 75-year-old isn't finished yet.
As soon as I'm in the water, I feel I'm at home. I really do. The very, very essential thing about corals is they build their own place to live. Corals have got together with algae to build things that nothing on Earth could possibly rival. That's how they live. And I reckon that's as fascinating as biology can get.
The corals of the Great Barrier Reef have been bleaching out for years because the ocean is warming due to climate change.
I predicted that by 2015 the carbon dioxide levels would be so high that it would cause bleaching practically every year. Felt horrible to be right. Scientists long to be right because that's what their business is. But it's all happened, and the consequences of that have turned out to be much worse than those predictions.
The Earth's largest coral reef system, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is in trouble.
It's exactly like me seeing my family slowly dying of something. It's very grave-like. It's very hard to continue when so many people think, oh, there's nothing wrong. And that makes me angry because this is utter stupidity.
It's not just rising sea temperatures that are threatening the reef. Agriculture is also partly to blame for the dying coral. Despite attempts to limit pollution, pesticide runoff from farms continues to destroy this unique marine habitat. European settlers first began planting crops and tending livestock in coastal areas some 150 years ago. This agricultural land use has increased up to tenfold the amount of sediment carried by rivers and streams into waters surrounding the Great Barrier Reef, along with large quantities of fertilisers and insecticides. Australia has unique natural treasures which attract growing numbers of tourists each year. Some 8.5 million visited in 2018. But Australia is also the world's biggest coal exporter, and the government continues to issue mining licences. One in every 4 Australians is sceptical about climate change, like retired miner Tony McGrath.
Years ago when I started there, you went there and you stayed there your working days, you know, everyone was happy out there, but now it's more temporary, like labour hire, fly in, fly out. They're not permanent jobs, and I think it's a shame.
Australians are not just world leaders in coal mining, they also have their share of climate change deniers.
Years, 100 years ago it was still pretty hot, you know. I don't think it's got any hotter, I really don't, eh? Not, you know, I don't think there's any proof there, really.
Australia's biggest and probably best known city is Sydney, with some 5 million inhabitants. There are several mining areas in the city's hinterland. 15-year-old Jean Hinchliffe has become the icon of Australia's green movement. For months now, the schoolgirl has been fighting the plans of the Indian concern Adani to build a mine that would increase coal exports by 20%. To transport the coal, port facilities very close to the Great Barrier Reef would be expanded.
Our 3 major goals are firstly for no new sources of fossil fuels, including the Adani mine, full renewable energy and exports by 2030, and for a just transition and job creation for all fossil fuel employed workers and communities.
Australia has some of the highest per capita CO2 emissions for a highly industrialised nation.
Well, I mean, I've spent my life growing up surrounded by this constant news of like polar ice caps melting and the Great Barrier Reef dying and animals losing their homes and bushfires and floods and this really enormous issue which no one is seeming to care that much about. And that's been really scary for me growing up, knowing that this is my future and this is what we're leading into.
As well as going to school, Jean Hinchliffe organises rallies and demonstrations with the help of her friends and her mother. Last September, Hinchliffe attended the UN Youth Climate Action Summit in New York.
See you, Mum.
She didn't plan to become a leading figure in the Australian environmental movement.
Actually, I just sent an email saying, oh, I'd love to help out if there's anything I can do. And suddenly I got a response saying, oh, we'd love to help you achieve this goal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the organiser now. I'm in the middle of this.
More than 2,000 businesses are backing school students around the country who'll strike today to demand more action against climate change.
For months now, tens of thousands have been regularly demonstrating against their government's climate policies.
Oh my God, hey!
The Conservative Liberal National Coalition is coal-friendly.
What do we do? Stand up, fight back! Future is under attack! What do we do? Stand up, fight back! Future is under attack! What do we do? Stand up, fight back! Future is under attack! Climate action! We want it now! Climate action! Now!
As recently as last November, the Prime Minister still denied a link between Australia's activities and the severity of the bushfires.
I think we've got to caution against raising the anxieties of children in our country. We've got to make sure that our kids understand the facts, but they also have the context and the perspective, and that we do not create an anxiety amongst children in how we talk about and deal with these very real issues.
But the devastating bushfires now appear to be changing people's minds. According to a new survey, some 78% of Australians now want to reduce the use of fossil fuels.
Oh my goodness, this is amazing. Look, they're still coming. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe that. Oh, okay. Hello, everyone.
The demonstrators make a direct link between climate change and the scale of bushfires in Australia.
This is not an inner city issue or a greenie issue. This is not a young person's issue or a wealthy person's issue. This is an everybody issue. We are the majority. And we demand change.
It must be incredible to see your daughter kind of talking to a crowd of
I know. It's like it's a different person. I don't feel like it's my daughter. It's just someone else up there who's such a great speaker. Yep.